everybody, and welcome to It's Your Money. I'm Alonzo and I'm your host. Today's topic is we're going to be focusing on banks. Banks in the world, in the United States and in the world. The banking industry makes billions, and I didn't say millions, I said billions a year in overdraft fees. A lot of people don't realize that most of the money that banks make, they make more in overdraft fees in profits than their regular banking profits altogether, because it's a system that has been designed, people. Today we need to focus on how you can go about eliminating these kind of fees, eliminating the things that banks can do to you, and fighting back at the same time with your politicians, whether you vote them in or out, or leaving that bank altogether. This will be a two-part series. Now today, what we're going to start off with is examining how exactly do they arrive to this $40 billion in fees. Now, you have a lot of banks who will go out and they do research when they're finding these people who's banking with them. Now, they're well-heeled and wealthy. Most of the people, that's not really the people they make most of their money from, okay? Because these people are they have their financial advisors, so they're well versed on exactly what's going on with the banks, and they know how to counter it. The bank, most of the time, the money they're making is mostly all for poor people, whether they're misinformed, lazy, or they figure they're too stupid to realize what's going on with them, or people who can't balance a checkbook. I think that it should be mandatory in all schools across the nation, that it should be a mandatory course that you should take in financing before you leave school, before you graduate from high school. And you can pass up something like pottery or cooking in class. This is something that will help you and the rest of your life as you're living in the financial world. And banks don't want that. Banks will sit there and rip you off. And those are the people, the poor people really are the one that's holding up that bag of all that money that they're making, the banks are making, and splitting amongst themselves. And they have a system, it's systematically done to you. Because if you take a look, go into poor neighborhoods, oftentimes they don't have a lot of option when it comes to banks. So they have to deal with that bank that they're dealing with. They have to pretty much deal with those rates, and they get higher rates when it comes to loans. They deny it at a higher rate. Even though they consider you a high risk, they will still rip you off. They'll take that money, even though they know that most of these people can't even balance their book. They wait for you to come around with the welfare check, or someone will give you a piece of money, or income tax time, and they know chances are that they're not going to be able to balance it. They will have went through that money within months, and by that time they will have excessive fees. Now, you can say what you want to about Obama, but George Bush didn't pass one. Bill Clinton didn't pass one. Ronald Reagan didn't pass one. George Bush Sr. didn't pass one. The Obama administration passed a sweeping legislation with Frank and Dodd under his administration. They passed sweeping legislation that forced banks to no longer force you into overdraft fees without your knowledge, giving you credit card statements that the dates are moving around. You have to get a set date, and they have to continue to stay at that date. They couldn't raise your interest rate at any given time without your prior notice. Now they have to give you time. They have to give you so much days notice, anywhere between 60 to 90 day notice or 45 days notice before they can do that. There's a lot of things you need to go online and look up the Frank Dodd sweeping legislation where they had financial reforms, and read up on it. Because without them, you can say whatever you want to, without them, you would at least wouldn't be able to have some of the stuff you have now. So while you're beating them up, also look back at the past presidents and see exactly what they passed, okay? Which was nothing. And most banks, their money goes into the pocket of Republicans. Now there are some Democrats that they get money from banks, but most bank associations, it goes into the pockets of Republicans. And they make sure they make laws that they can continue to just rip you off until their heart is content. So you people have to go in there and force banks to treat you like a customer and not a number, and not as a disrespect. Because like I said, you go into poor neighborhood, they don't. You see billboards for CDs and beers and cars. They want you to buy. But you go into a well-heeled and wealthy areas, you see bank signs and home ownership and college, because they're investing in those areas because they have more respect for their money and not yours. So you people have to take it. You got to take it serious. You know, you have a lot of banks out there that just continues to just ripping you off. Now, I'm going to send you all, if you all ever get a chance, to go over to wisebread.com. And the author over there his name is Will Chin. He's the co-founder. And he brought up some statistics to show you the banking industry's strategy. Now, he had one where this gentleman went in, he had $185 in the bank, okay? And he got a smoothie on October the 1st, he got a smoothie for $5. On the 2nd, he went to the gas station, he spent $29, which means that he should have had $156 left in there. On October the 3rd, he went into a coffee cafe and spent $8. He should have had $148 left. He also went in on October the 4th and got electronics for $9, which means he should have had $58 left. On the last day, he went to the supermarket and he spent $105, which means that when he spent that, he was overdraft, and he was at a negative 47. The bank should have made $35 off of that. Okay, $35. That's it. But what the bank does is they have a system, and it's legal because all banks throughout the industry is using it. It's a practice. They're flipping check. They're moving them around. And what they did was, in turn, instead of taking it in the order that he had did his debits, in the order that what they did, they sit and took the larger one and worked their way down. What they did was they moved that one from the 5th to on the 1st. They sit and processed the $105 check. That left him with $85. On the 2nd, they did electronics with $90, which left him $5. Now here's where it gets tricky now. On the 3rd, he went to the gas station. They used the $29. He was below $39 then. Then the smoothie was $5. He was add $5 to $39. He was $44 under. And the last one with the coffee was $8. Now he was $52 below. Each one of them days from the 2nd to the 5th, it was a $35 hit because they'll move his checks around now. The more he was underwater. Now, there should be no way that they should be able to do that. That should not be legal, but it is, unfortunately, because they have laws that allow them to do that. And this guy, his name was Ron Brown, who was over the banking association, who had nerve to say that that's a standard industry practice. And they asked him, "Do you think that was fair?" He said, "Well, what's fair to the customers that they should know how much money they have in the bank?" Not that it was wrong, because they have a right to do that to you, and they don't. You should have it to where you're starting to go and find other banks that's going to treat you with a better handshake than something like that. That is clear, concise, and straightforward rip-off strategy. And it's all profit-based and nothing else. And you're not going to tell me that they say, well, most people have mortgage payments and house payments and they want larger payments first. That's not your choice. That's not the bank's choice. It's the consumer's choice. When I put my money in the bank, the moment that I start making my purchases, you should transact those purchases in the order that you receive them, not the order that you decide that you want to. So that way you can profit off of it. How is it that I can put in $300 or $30,000 for that matter, and you can give me 1%? Banks give you 1%, and that's being generous, 1-2%. But they'll take that same $30,000 you gave them and then go out there and loan to somebody else for 15, 20, 10, 15, 20, and 30%, because they can. Now, but they can tell you that we can't afford to give you any more interest, because what's happening is that American people and the banking world as a whole, they're allowing them to get away with it. If you took your money out of these banks in one big rush, they will start to come to the table and respect you. But they don't respect you because most people, like they said, they're lazy, and it's ignorance to the facts of policy, stupidity, where they just accept it. And some of them, you just haven't been taught it, so you don't know any better. So you go out there, it's almost like you're walking outside not knowing what the weather is. If you know what the weather is, you're going to dress accordingly. If you don't, then you're going to be stuck out there in that weather, no matter how harsh or hard that weather is to you. So to conclude this first segment, we're going to talk in the next segment about credit unions and certain ways that you can go about counteracting banks who's clearly out for profits and holding them accountable, just like they hold you accountable. They have rules in place for themselves that guards themselves against you, but consumers for the most part think outside of Frank Dodd legislation and other little implementations, they have nothing. So you should thank Frank and Dodd and Obama for even caring about the regular consumer. You know, you have a lot of people who have complaints about them, but they're continuously eating off these same plates that's been put out there by Obama and Frank and Dodd. You can't sit in one breath and say, oh, I hate them, but yet and though you'll sit there and still go out there and complain about them. Just like that, to end this segment before I go to the next one, is to, excuse me ladies and gentlemen, I'm getting an email there. To conclude this segment is, you have the cash for clunker a few years back. And you have people complaining, Republican complaining, oh, you know, that didn't really work. You know, they crushed some cars that were really good, and these cars aren't really fuel efficient like they sit and said. They are sitting there focusing on something that ain't got nothing to do with nothing except the fact they're trying to find something to complain about. But I tell you one thing, I bet you when them cash for clunkers was coming in dealerships, I bet you all of them weren't Democrat. I bet you some of them called dealerships Republican. They were taking the money. They didn't have no problem taking the money, did they? They didn't have no problem. I bet you some of these places where they were crushing these cars, I bet you they weren't all Democrats. I bet you some of them were Republicans that were crushing the cars and getting money for doing it, or getting cars where they can sit there and pick it apart and outsell it for way more than what they paid out for it, or what they got it if they were for free, the contract they had. See, so that's what I'm saying. I hate a person who will sit there and complain about all kind of different situations, but they're sitting there still eating off the plate. Because most of the time, those people are disingenuous at best. And they're too much of a coward to come to the light and say, yes, that's me. But I love discussing with these kind of people because you put them on the spot. So to close this out, I look forward to talking to you next week on part 2 about the banking system, the banking industry, and how they perform and how they create strategies to profit of most of the working class back. That sums it up for this show. I'm Alonzo. Have a great afternoon, and I look forward to seeing you.